Taiwan's largest annual military exercise, the Han Kuang Exercise, kicked off this week against the backdrop of increased U.S. military operations in this part of the world. While the 5-day drill is part of a pro-secession attempts to resist a national reunification. What are the latest developments? As the U.S. increases arms supplies, will this bring Taiwan greater security or uncertainty? How might China-U.S. relations affect cross-Strait ties and vice versa? To discuss these issues, I'm joined in the studio by Teng Jianqun, Director of the Department for American Studies at the China Institute of International Studies, and by satellite from Taiwan by Professor Yan Chenshen of the National Chengchi University and N.R. Tongan, independent current affairs commentator. That is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. So why don't we start with you, Mr. Teng? This is actually an annual military exercise by the Taiwan authorities, but this first time they have fired a live torpedo, and they also mentioned they will focus on joint battalions and special forces. How important is that?
This is actually a testing of the recent years' military reform of Taiwan, which was initiated from 1990s. Since then, they first started the brigade level, so-called joint forces in Taiwan, and now they have already finished the restructuring of battalion-based operational units, and also they also fired the so-called the self-made torpedoes during the drill. This is a new development for the military reform of the structure in Taiwan. I think they just show the willingness for the leaders in Taiwan to do something in the preparation to deal with the challenge, or so-called challenge from the mainland.
But do you make any significant changes in terms of the scale and the intent of Han Kuang military exercise this year?
Yeah, the scale almost the same as usual. This is annual and the largest military drill each year in Taiwan. And the intention or the items established for the military drill, actually some changes we have witnessed. For example, the special operational warfares, and to protect the leaders of Taiwan to escape from the first strike from mainland. So this is actually a new scenario for the Taiwan military to prepare some warfare, very special related to the mainland.
And Professor Yan, what have you noticed about this year's Han Kuang military exercise?
Yes. Oh, to me, I think the most important development is the joint forces of the reserves. Taiwan's military strength used to be 600,000 when I was in the military, and now it's down to less than 200,000. So people always say, we don't need all these forces, but what about the reserve? So the reserve have been called each year, like maybe for 5 days to a week. And this is a time to see how reserve can fit into the regular forces if they are called upon, to serve in a military time. So
why there is a necessity to incorporate
also,
reserve forces this time?
Well, I think in the past, in Taiwan, we always believed that the battle would be decided on the Taiwan Strait. The Air Force, the naval forces. But in the past few years, I think there are more concerns about, amphibious landing by PLA, and then you have to do some kind of, stoppage here on the island. So it's not just the Air Force or the naval forces. The armies have to take a role as well.
And what about the combat readiness of the Taiwan military? And our young people are very supportive of joining the military, or are they risk averse?
I think they are risk averse. So right now, the one you're calling back are, kind of in their 30s or late 20s. But if you look at the young people, they don't even want to be in the military. So that's a big problem. I think the ruling party right now is just trying to show that this is the threat is real, and we cannot just sit on the sideline and just using we call it keyboard to decide the battle between Taiwan and China. You have to be involved in the actual fighting. But so far, I think this has not been drilled into the head of the young people. The young people, on the one hand, are very much pro-independent, but at the same time, they don't want to fight. They're waiting for the Americans to help. So such a drill and exercise will help Taiwan at least to justify some kind of American assistance if war actually happened. Because if we don't do our part, I think the United States will have no reason to help Taiwan at all.
But what do you make of the performances of the military this time during the military exercise? Because it seems accidents happen.
Well,
2 soldiers died in a helicopter crash,
yeah, just this afternoon. Yeah.
So this is not the first time such thing happened in a military exercise in Taiwan. What happened? Is it just isolated cases, or do they say anything about the performance of its military readiness?
I really think the performance is not up to the par. We will need a much better performance, much better preparedness, just in terms of preparing for this exercise. You have already people die, and then during the exercise now we have this helicopter crash. So you have to check all the equipments and all those just in the peacetime to make sure that everything are ready. But now I don't think we have that kind of preparedness. So this is a big wake-up call. I hope that if the military is serious about its drilling and exercise, it cannot wait until months before the exercise. You have to start it right now for next year's exercise.
Anar, there were reports saying that some Americans have been sending liaison officers to watch the Han Kuang military exercise in Taiwan. How much interested Americans in the Taiwan military drill?
From a military perspective, it would be almost impossible for the U.S. to help Taiwan in a real confrontation. The internal reports of the military indicate that Taiwan could not hold out even for 5 days, and even if it did, marshaling the kind of forces that would be necessary to bring to bear almost impossible. So in essence, there is this kind of false hope that somehow the United States would step in. But I think at some point Taiwan will realize that they're a political pawn in a game that Donald Trump is playing, but that he has no intention of carrying through.
But there are real things happening on the ground. Recently, the U.S. State Department approved a request to supply Taiwan with PAC-3 missiles at a cost of $620 million. In addition to that, as of July, the Trump administration notified its Congress of 7 deals worth more than $13 billion in military sales to Taiwan. So what should we make of this military equipment sales? Are they stepping up efforts to bolster Taiwan's military power, or is it just consistent with the past administrations?
No, it's not consistent with past administrations, but you'll notice that everywhere that Donald Trump went to, he insisted that arms be brought, even though at the same time he was putting tariffs on Taiwanese steel and aluminum. Taiwan is kind of adrift. They're stuck in between. They don't have a trade pact. Their economic initiatives to go south have not panned out. And their closeness in terms of the economics, which reached 41% of GDP was connected to China in 2018, has made it almost impossible to break away that way. So, when we start talking about the military aspects of this, the fact is This would be an unmitigated disaster for Taiwan, also for China, but there's no way that the United States would be stepping in. They might use this as a cudgel against China and say that China is an aggressive power, but apart from that, they'd be more than happy to sacrifice Taiwan.
Professor Yan, how do Taiwan people view the recent promise to purchase more than $13 billion of arms from the Americans?
Of course, this deal, just like earlier I said, if we don't purchase weapons, if we don't, our young people don't serve in the military, we have no guarantee at all from the United States that it might intervene. But, you know, with the purchase of the arms, at least we, you know, if American leaders decided to help Taiwan, they can convince the American, people saying Taiwanese do try to defend themselves, and by purchasing all the weapons, but it is such a asymmetrical, relation, military, relation with mainland China. So basically, Taiwan cannot defend itself, but it tried to buy weapons, tried to spend money to defend itself. It tried to, mobilize its people. That might have a chance. I agree with the earlier comment that Taiwan, usually I would think, if we don't provoke China, we don't unilaterally change the status quo by declaring independence, de jure independence, we might be able to avoid, confrontation. But currently, the government seems to try to play the game of brinkmanship, hoping that maybe if there's something happen that we don't declare independence, but China still attack us, then the United States might intervene. Again, I don't trust the United States. I don't trust Donald Trump.
And what do you think, Mr. Tom? Because as Professor Yan said, even though Taiwan is trying to buy so much equipment from the U.S., it is still a asymmetric relationship between Taiwan and mainland, because the military power is not the same level.
Of course. Yeah, you're right. I think there is new tendency of development in arms sales to Taiwan by the United States. For example, they have already sent the most advanced equipment or weapon systems to Taiwan, including the tanks, the aircraft, and also some armed vehicles. Actually, these weapon systems are widely used by the active military force in the United States. So this is a new tendency. Another is that the United States would like to arm Taiwan military as one part of the whole strategy of the United States in Asia-Pacific region. They would like to play the game with China, and they would like to take the military in Taiwan as one part of the U.S. military force to confront or to deal with any challenges from the mainland.
So you're saying the Americans are also practicing brinksmanship?
Yeah, of course. They would like to give some bargaining stake in the hand of Madam Tsai and in the President of the United States with the mainland.
Then what do you think Chinese mainland should do in response? Because we, of course, opposed to the arms sales of Americans to Taiwan, but what else can we do except lodging condemnation?
Actually, since early 1990s, the PRA has been prepared to wage a war in the southeast coast, along the coast, just opposite Taiwan Island. Actually, we have already been well prepared for any instance in case of the situation that had been changed in across Taiwan Strait. And of course, we would like to use the political influence or the economic influence in this game played with the United States, with Taiwan. So I think militarily speaking, the PRA has been well prepared to wage any confrontation or war.
So militarily speaking, even the stepping up of integrated services and special forces in Taiwan wouldn't make much a difference if there was a conflict.
You are right, because they're not at the same level. In terms of the military capability, for example, the rocket forces of the mainland, the naval forces, the air force this time, even the United States in some scenario, they would like to give support or direct support to Taiwan. I don't think they can make any sense in this regard.
But Anna, Randall Shriver, that's former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, he said the military sales to Taiwan are force for stability. And his argument is that they allow Taiwan to negotiate with the Chinese mainland, quote, without a gun to their heads. What do you say to that?
Well, it's nonsense. There's 2 million Taiwanese living on mainland China. There's a tremendous amount of economic activity. This idea that there was a gun to Taiwan's head is silly. Yes, in the Constitution it says united China and that Taiwan is inextricably part of China and shall be reunited. But there was no forced march on this. To the contrary, it was Tsai Ing-wen who decided that she didn't want to utter a few simple words that would have assured Beijing that she was not going independent. Instead, she's gone the other way. Remember, Tsai Ing-wen, she was politically finished 2 years ago when her party lost all those local elections. She even stood down and wasn't going to run for president. It was only after the situation in Hong Kong that she once again started using this independence idea as a stepping stone to getting back in power. But what I fear is going to happen here is that right now Donald Trump is desperate. He is trying to get reelected. If he isn't, the situation does not look good for him. Would he be willing to try to manufacture a Bay of Tonkin incident where he can then claim that China has been the aggressor, attacked the United States, and that this is a reason that China is, in fact, the enemy, and then unite his idea that he's been preaching locally to people that China is the bad guy, and then saying anybody who opposes him is obviously either a dupe or an agent of China, something he's already said of Joe Biden. So this is a real danger, and people should be aware of it.
But as you said, this is a good political bargain. Selling arms to Taiwan before election to anger China sells politically, and also Taiwan would love to buy more equipment from America to boost their political positions. It seems a win-win for both.
Yeah, but where is it going? What's the end game? All you have is less money for an economic revival, which is badly needed, not only in Taiwan, but around the world. So, this is always a question. It may look good to posture politically, but what is the end game? And Tsai Ing-wen, so far, has not exhibited any idea of what that means.
So, Professor Yan, has a Taiwan leader ever considered the downside of purchasing so much equipment from America in symbolic meaning, bolstering its capabilities, but doesn't make any sense, but probably will bring the bilateral relationship across the straits into dangerous territory?
Well, I think when the KMT was in power, I actually favor buying more weapons because that will embolden the KMT to convince the local people, saying we are going to negotiate with strength, because the DPP will accuse that the KMT will be kowtow to the Beijing.
The KMT is the opposition party right now in Taiwan.
When it was in power, I think that makes sense. But now with the DPP, denying the 92 consensus, there is no reason to buy weapons, hoping that weapons somehow will bring that, my idea of negotiation with strength, but simply because they are just trying to make sure this is an insurance that you can maybe bring the United States in. But the most important thing in Taiwan, I think, is so what? You buy all these weapons, but are you having the best people in the military to operate those weapons. So far, we are not able to recruit the best, the talented young people, the best people to join the military. So that would be something I think our government need to change its attitude toward the military by really raising the status of the military officer, helping people to respect people, the officers, like I have observed in China about the PLA, or in the United States, anyone who return from overseas tours, they are highly respected, but not in Taiwan. The military are being abused. So,
are you saying the military reform in Taiwan is just some political drama without any substance?
But we just don't have a culture that serving in the military is an honorable job right now. And it's not highly respected. I think if we have that kind of culture, like the PLA or the American military, it would be a different story. So this is, I think, the biggest concern. Is so what, you spend so much money buying such expensive weapons, but you are not putting the best, most talented people to operate those weapons.
We have also considered the bigger picture, because how important is Taiwan for Asia security, for bilateral relations between China and America? In a recent memoir by former U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton, he said President Trump would point to the tip of his Sharpies and say, this is Taiwan, and then point to his Resolute desk and say, this is China. Does that mean that in President Trump's mind, Taiwan is actually insignificant to his China policy?
Of course, you're right. Actually, Donald Trump just manipulated the situation, or just manipulated the tension across Taiwan Strait for his own sake. For example, the arms sale to Taiwan. He can get a lot of money, and he can get a lot of opportunities of job for Americans. This is actually his own sake. And also the national strategy by the United States just gave a very good excuse for Donald Trump to play the game with China over Taiwan issue. The United States, especially after Donald Trump took the office in the White House, he adopted a new national strategy that is to compete with China. The recent changes in China-U.S. relation, we have witnessed a lot of troubles and a lot of obstacles for the stable relation between the two countries. I think the relation between China and the United States has been changed greatly, and Taiwan might be a bargaining stake in the hand of Donald Trump. But I don't think he can make it just because the Chinese position or Chinese power in this region. Of course, China will give 100% determination or capability to make the integrity of the country.
Professor Yan, I don't know how much coverage this get in Taiwan, but when Taiwan people reading the excerpts like this, they are treated like a pawn, and not so valuable pawn. What do they think?
Well, I think Taiwan has a kind of wrong idea about Donald Trump, because the way that Donald Trump criticized China and a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment in Taiwan, and those people feel so good about this, but forgot about the nature of his diplomacy is transactional in nature, means he can easily sell off Taiwan. We can see stronger words from his Vice President, Mike Pence, or from his Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to support Taiwan, but we never really heard anything that strong from President Trump. So I don't trust President Trump. And I think Taiwan gradually realized that, America right now, at least under Trump, is conducting transactional diplomacy. Don't forget, John Bolton's book said, Taiwan might be the next one after, the Kurdish people to be sold by the American people.
So those
by the
$13 billion worth of
to be
equipment may
betrayed.
not
So,
bolster
I don't
Taiwan's defense capabilities, may probably go down the toilet if President Trump thinks Taiwan is this.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, with the American, you mentioned about the American advisors observing Taiwan's drill. I remember one time they were hoping that Taiwan can be at least like, somewhere close to Israel's defense capability. And one time they told us, they said, well, we found out you look just like Panama. And so we have to somehow convince the Americans through this exercise that we have some deterrent capability. Otherwise,
but the question is whether it will sell to the Americans. NR, of course, a lot of people think Taiwan is used as a leverage, but what kind of leverage will it be, especially in the coming, in the run-up to the November election? It seems that Trump is doing whatever it takes to win the election. Will Taiwan be part of it?
Yes, I mean, it's part of his anti-China campaign things. This is that O'Donnell and Associates paper that came out on behalf of the Republicans in the Senate to re-elect the Senate and also Donald Trump. And basically what it says is don't defend yourself, attack, 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 and the only target is China. So at this point, he's going down that road. Every day you see new things. New attacks on China from every direction: security, culture, education, technology, anything that he will throw a book at it. But, make no mistake, if for some reason somebody could guarantee him that if he gave Taiwan to China in exchange for him being re-elected president, I think he'd make that deal in a heartbeat. And remember, the same guy who was willing to sell part of U.S. soil, Puerto Rico, because he didn't like the way the hurricane turned out.
So, Mr. Tang, what should China do? Obviously, President Trump is doing a lot of things otherwise wouldn't be done by a U.S. president, be it the South China Sea, be it Taiwan, Huawei, or whatever. What should China do?
To be frank, China should be well prepared for any, challenges from the United States. Especially, you mentioned this is a presidential election year, and President Donald Trump at this time can do anything for his own sake to be re-elected. This is actually a new situation or new scenario for China and the United States. How can we deal such a challenge? First, I should be saying that the Chinese government should be very cautious toward such a challenge.
Should be cool-headed, you're suggesting.
Yeah. And the second, we should be well prepared to deal with any challenging economy, security,
or even militarily.
Even in ideology. In recent days.
What about militarily?
Military, of course, we have been well prepared at this moment. Because, the recent military drills by the U.S. Navy, 3 aircraft carrier battle groups in the South China Sea, in the Filipino Sea. They just changed the naval strategy. They used to take the military strategy, the naval strategy as from the sea. They would like to control the littoral area, just to launch attack from the sea. But this time, they would like to wage war in the high sea, in the public sea, because according to the naval officers from the United States, said this is a game played with Chinese Navy, because China has aircraft carrier battle groups this time. So they would like to have a war with China in the high sea, not only along the coast area.
Obviously, brinksmanship is a game that a lot of people like to play. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tang. Thank you, Mr. Yan, and thank you, Einar. And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhou in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.